This episode of the Disruption Lab is taped in front of a live studio audience. That's y'all. Kalin, you spent years in a lab researching ionic liquids, then decided to launch a climate tech company. What was the moment when you realized that your research wasn't just theoretical, that it actually had market applications and could actually kind of shape the world that we lived in?
Yeah, I mean, such a big question. I think for me, when I came into my PhD, I had never heard about refrigerants really before, at least not in an in-depth way. I'd never really knew about ionic liquids before either. I came from a very different background where my research was more electrochemistry based. And so when I came to KU, I really came to work with Dr. Mark Shiflett, and his background was refrigerants. So he was the inventor of many of the refrigerant mixtures that we use today, had 29 years at DuPont before transitioning to academia. And so he really had this kind of basis for this project coming when I came in. And so I got to come into this project with there already being some understanding of what this market and some of the challenges that would be, at least from the technology perspective. Mm-hmm. And then together, we were able to go through the National Science Foundation Icicore program. And we did that about a year into my PhD, a little over. And if you're not familiar, NSF Icicore programs, you do 100 customer interviews in about 8-9 weeks. And you really try to come to that decision point of, is this technology actually going to be used within a market? And so for us, we were able to come out and say, okay, we think the separation technology is needed based off of the legislative needs, based off of the complex mixtures that we see within this market. But now we need to go out and actually talk to people. So it was really after Icicore.
Okay. I did not realize that Icicore was such a short kind of window to get all those customer interviews.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Is that part of the application process to be able to say that you have those lined up, you have that opportunity to go do that?
So definitely saying you have the bandwidth to do it, but you don't have them all lined up. And so it's really, you jump in and you get to cold call a lot and you get to network a lot during that time. And essentially you have 15 to 17 interviews every week that are due. And so you are going through and you are kind of rapid fire trying to prove out like all of your hypotheses around, is this technology valid for this market? And there's great teams within NSF who help guide you through this. And so like the NSF Icicore teams from New York were who we worked with. And they did a phenomenal job of kind of pushing us, guiding us, and helping us get answers to those questions.
Okay. So for the average person, explain what Icorium does.
Yeah. So Icorium at its core is trying to create a circular economy for refrigerants. And we do this through separation. And so really all we do is we use equipment to separate complex mixtures back into their component parts so they can be reused and recycled.
And so Icorium is one of those outputs. Is that correct? Or how do I think about Icorium specifically?
So Icorium is an engineering and technology company who is creating that technology that actually facilitates separation. Icorium, which is a company...
Sit more straight? Yeah, I got you.
Sorry, I messed up the question.
No. So, maybe I'm confusing the company name with one of the...
Like a product name?
A product name. Yes.
Okay, yes. So Icorium is us as a company creating the technology to actually separate these complex refrigerant mixtures. And then when you get down to it, the actual separated refrigerant, we're calling that Icorium. And so that is kind of the product side. But right now we're still at the pilot scale. And so we're still building out the technology and getting to scale that up to commercial levels.
So climate tech gets talked about in like these big abstract ways. For you, what's the human side of refrigerant recovery? And how do you stay connected to kind of the real world stakes of the problem that you're solving?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about refrigerants, they're something that we use every single day. So they're critical materials. Just think about this morning when you opened your refrigerator. You got a cold beverage out. You were using refrigerants. The air conditioning in this room right now. So we're surrounded by refrigerants in our everyday lives. We just don't think about them very often. And then when you think about it on a bigger scale, now think of every grocery store, think of every home, think of every car, and think of the massive scale that these materials are used on. And they're all man-made materials. So these are chlorofluorocarbons, hydrofluorocarbons. They're things that we have made and work really well for these applications. And so for me, it really comes down to how can we be good stewards of these molecules? How can we reuse, recycle, repurpose these things that we made? They're also very valuable. They're valuable, stable molecules. And so we want to be able to put those to good use.
So why do we care? Like, what's the downside of refrigerants? Like, why is this important, I guess?
Yeah. So refrigerants are super pollutants. And so to put it in perspective, the refrigerants we use today on average, if you were to release a pound of that refrigerant, it's equal to almost more than a ton of CO2 equivalent emissions.
Wow. Okay.
And so when we think about the environmental impact of these getting out into the atmosphere, it's huge. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that everything's being captured, and they are supposed to be, but make sure they're captured, but then not only that, they're able to be repurposed, reused, regenerated in a way that is going to make sure they have a very long life and not end up just being released.
So when you have maybe an air conditioner that's leaking, those kind of, that is super bad. Those are super pollutants that are actually getting out into the,
yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
But so that's one of the really cool things about the refrigerant industry. So right now we're actually transitioning to a more environmentally friendly refrigerant. So we kind of solved the ozone crisis with the refrigerants we use today. So the first generation we ever used of refrigerants were chlorofluorocarbons, and that chlorine was largely responsible for creating the hole in the ozone. And so we created hydrofluorocarbons, and that's where Mark is an inventor, my co-founder, of a lot of those refrigerant mixtures. And those have zero ozone depletion potential, but they just still had very high global warming potential. And so right now we're in the middle of a transition to hydrofluorolefins, which are kind of the newest generation that have zero ozone depletion still, but they also have a very low global warming potential.
So this next question, take this with a grain of salt, I guess. You don't fit the profile for the average deep tech founder, right? Demographically, a Latina founder. How has your identity shaped the way that you do the work that you do, the way that you lead, and how has that kind of shaped your perspective as an entrepreneur?
I mean, it all goes back to the people, the mentors, the role models that I've had the privilege of having. So my parents, first and foremost, they started an engineering firm. My dad's a civil engineer. And so I got to see that growing up and see that kind of entrepreneurial spirit there and see them actually go through doing that. And then during my time at UNM and into Sandia, I had some wonderful mentors there who encouraged me to pursue not only the entrepreneurial path, so getting involved with like UNM Innovation Academy and getting to do my first pitch competition there and those types of things versus Sandia, who our team there really encouraged me to get my master's in chemical engineering and then ultimately was a big part of why I ended up going on to my PhD. And so those people kind of led a base of it, and then being able to come into a program with someone like Mark Shiflett as your advisor, who is willing to support you doing things outside of a traditional PhD program, that really just opens the doors to be able to do things like Icicore and then co-found a company.
So now the work that Mark has done, the work that you're doing has led to kind of a larger opportunity for the university in terms of kind of the funding and the focus of one of the I think it's Earth.
ERC Earth, yeah.
Yeah, so what is Earth? Like, how would you describe that to, again, the average person?
Yeah, so Earth is an engineering research center that is founded partially through the National Science Foundation, and then it also brings in a whole bunch of other funding sources through consortium companies, partnerships through universities, local governments. And so all of it comes together to fund research on refrigerants. So ultimately, it's calling out and saying this industry needs to have more technology development and more workforce development, and we're putting a lot of funding and resources that are dedicated to doing that specifically for refrigerants. And so it's really targeting things like separation, reuse, recycle, repurposing, targeting things like leak detection, targeting, okay, after HFOs, hydrofluorolefins, what does that next generation of refrigerants look like? So it's really saying, let's intentionally put a lot of resources into this industry and solve the pain points that we see with industry partners.
And is there anything like this in the United States? I mean, is this the first of its kind?
So engineering research centers exist
Sure.
on a bunch of different topics, but I believe this is the first one focused on refrigerants. And so very exciting.
How do I think about the scale of this? I mean, and I think the first time I met you, this was a conversation that we had very briefly, which was the magnitude of this issue goes beyond, air conditioners and, refrigerators.
Yeah.
And so help me understand the scope and scale of, maybe Earth's focus or kind of what the opportunity is here.
Yeah, I think for Earth, the focus is to solve critical issues in the refrigeration industry, and that is a global issue. And so we use the same refrigerants all across the world. So the US doesn't use different refrigerants than Europe or Asia. We're all using these same refrigerants. We might be in different places along the refrigerant generation journey, but we're all using those refrigerants, all coming across the same challenges. We know refrigerants leak, and so that's something that is a problem everywhere. Yeah. So how do we solve those problems and deploy those into industry? And I think that's one of the most important aspects of this is it's funding research on issues that are highlighted by key partners in industry. So we know it's something that's going to already be impactful and useful. But then on top of that, you have partners who can help commercialize that technology. And so it's kind of bridging the academic and industrial gap where it's saying, okay, let's make sure we bring both of these parties together and really have impactful research.
If you were to, draw out the trajectory of refrigerant use, I think one of the things that you had mentioned to me earlier was it's just growing. Like the number of people who, don't have air conditioning, don't have refrigeration, that like those things are all becoming adopted more globally. So this issue is not getting smaller. It's growing exponentially as we speak, right? Yeah.
If you think about even just in the US, there's areas that now need air conditioning that never needed it before. Just think data centers, grocery stores, the numbers of all these things are growing. And so as we look at that usage in the US, it's increasing, but then globally, think about places that have maybe never had access to it to begin with, who are now starting to implement air conditioning, or again, places that have never needed it before, but because of global warming, we're seeing a need for air conditioning to make situations livable. So it really is becoming something that's necessary. And it's also something that if you think of just our other industries, vaccine storage, food storage, if you think of a lot of the manufacturing processes we rely on, a lot of those all use cooling.
I hadn't even thought about the data center explosion and the expanded growth of artificial intelligence and that's all got to be, those data centers all have to be cooled, super cooled. Yeah. Interesting. You've gone from PhD candidate to startup CEO. What's the one thing that academia prepared you for, and something that it didn't prepare you for as a founder?
I think the world of academia prepares you to think critically and solve challenging problems, and that's something that we use every day. And so I think that is something that I have definitely taken from that, as well as kind of the teamwork aspect and being able to grow with a team, work with a team, and mentor people along the way. So that's a huge part from the academic world. I would say one thing is with a PhD, you're very focused. You're very in on one thing and kind of have a set goal there. And I think that's something as a startup founder, you can go a million different ways at once. And so I think having and being able to kind of go all those different ways at once and find that balance is something that I've definitely been learning.
Yeah, how's that transition been?
Fun, definitely a learning experience. I think as you make that transition, I've been fortunate to have phenomenal people around me to help support that and grow it. And, you're still learning every single day.
Did you ever envision being a startup founder, being an entrepreneur? It sounded like the path you were on was not maybe headed in that direction, or was that something that you always kind of had in the back of your mind that you wanted to do?
I think it wasn't until later in my kind of master's MBA that I maybe even considered it as an option. And I think when I started getting involved with pitch competitions and doing some of that early stuff, I was like, oh, this could be cool. I could see actually enjoying this. And then it was kind of there for me where say like, okay, if this is an option and this is something that I get the opportunity to do, I want to take it. And so that was kind of the mindset I had coming into the PhD was there's no guarantees, right? But if we have the opportunity and the technology is going to fit and we get the chance to do this, let's try it.
So we talked a little bit about NSF Icor, and then also you placed top 5 at the Rice business plan competition. Yep. Congratulations. So what's a playbook or tactic that you used in those programs that more founders should be thinking about?
I think it's something that I think a lot of founders are thinking about, but it's bringing that team in. Believe me, that was not a win on my own. Actually, Abby Harders, who did her PhD at KU as well, she pitched with me through the Rice Business Plan competition. We had a lot of fun getting to do that together. We got to have our team there with us who was helping coach us and take notes and do all that along the way. And so I think that's one of the biggest lessons, though, is like you don't have to be going through a lot of that by yourself. Bring in those people, bring in that support, bring in the people who have that network and that experience.
It's important. I think a lot of us, we always talk about entrepreneurship being a lonely journey. You can surround yourself with, champions, supporters, advisors, that support group that's kind of mission aligned with, that helps a tremendous amount, right?
Oh yeah. And having people who believe in this and having that team that's all in on that message and believes in the technology, believes in creating that circular economy for refrigerants. It just kind of fuels that fire. And it allows us to do a lot of incredible things together.
How did you get connected to a lot of that? Was this through the program? Was this, I guess, how do you... Yeah. I think a lot of founders struggle with that, is why I ask. And so it sounds like it was a little bit maybe more natural for you in kind of the environment you were in, or?
I think for me, I still draw on my network from New Mexico. Sometimes I still have people I call and get advice from, and keeping those mentors, I think, is something that's been huge. But I think then also coming into KU and coming into the PhD program, Mark has a lot of experience as well, very well connected, but then also we were able to build kind of those partnerships and just being curious, showing up to events, networking, asking lots of questions. Those really helped a lot in those early kind of building the company, starting the company, just getting a business address and doing those things like that. That network helped immensely. And so, we've just been able to keep growing that team and those people.
You're building in a space where regulation, chemistry, and capital kind of all collide. How do you keep the company strategically focused in an environment that's that complex?
Yeah, there's a lot of things we're always keeping eyes on. Obviously, the legislative push is huge. It's something that is facilitating that transition from the hydrofluorocarbons we use today to the hydrofluorolefins. And it's something that is very helpful in the sense of when you think of complex mixtures, we're increasing the complexity of the materials we're using in that transition. So it really is opening more opportunity for us and not less in terms of being able to recycle these. But also just understanding all the influences, what's happening, where is reclaimed refrigerant going to be required? Is it going to be fully required in different areas? Understanding all that is really critical. And then, beyond just the legislative side, I think capital side is huge. This is going to be an industrial technology, and plants do take a lot of capital to do that. And so being strategic and how we're able to bring on key partners, being strategic on how we understand the market and get insights into what really are the pain points, how is the best way to implement this technology. Again, that comes to talking to a lot of people. We are constantly talking to key partners, both for the legislative aspect and for kind of the implementation side of the technology. And then obviously the tech itself, every day we're pushing that forward. So our engineers are in the lab, we're modeling, we're running experiments, we're piloting. And so that's a really key aspect to show those proof points so that we can show how we can scale this technology.
So it's a relatively sensitive topic for a lot of people, but the current political environment and a lot of the maybe defocus or the shift away from maybe climate related issues. Yeah. Is that a concern for the work that you're doing? Do you think that there's a multi-purpose kind of view of what you're doing that insulates it from some of those maybe more socially focused conversations about circular economy or climate or some of those other types of things?
Yeah, we definitely have a green aspect to this technology, but I think beyond that, we just have a technology need within the market. And when you look at these materials, a lot of them are stockpiled because they get mixed afterlife. And so there's millions and millions of pounds that are just being essentially paid to sit there. and be stored until something becomes available that can actually handle them and recycle them, because the other option is incineration. And so that's also an expensive kind of way to, I guess, mitigate those gases, but it also leads to other byproducts. So really you're looking at two options that aren't ideal. And we, like I said, we want to be able to reuse those molecules. And so for us, there's a big push, even just from the market side, of saying, how do we handle these materials? And how do we make sure that they are getting the value out of them that they should, and not just being kind of sat out there and not having any technology that can handle them.
A lot of times when we talk about circular economy, we talk about new uses of old materials, especially as maybe that they're decomposed into their component parts. Mm-hmm. Are there new uses of what you're doing, or is it truly kind of that recycling it back into refrigerant as a use, or are there other things, other byproducts, other monetization opportunities, commercialization opportunities that come from the technology and the work that you're doing to actually split these things back out?
Yeah, so obviously with the separation, those materials now become almost like a pure product again. And so they can definitely be reused as refrigerants. They can reblend it into the ones they were, a new refrigerant, or a really exciting one is they can actually be repurposed. And so the repurposing, there's actually quite a few organic chemists now starting to work on this, where how do you actually convert a hydrofluorocarbon that is no longer needed as a refrigerant into another product. So you can see that there's now this kind of path going down on the chemistry side. We might see these turned into fluoropolymers or precursors for those. And so there's some options for how we could reuse these materials in other ways outside of refrigerants, which that's also really exciting, because there will be a point where certain materials won't be used as refrigerants any longer.
Uh-huh. And so that storage of those, that's maybe then an opportunity, to create new products out of things that are sitting latent today or
Exactly.
with no use. Yeah. Interesting. For people who hear this, if I think about, okay, you're dealing with refrigerants, I don't know that screams innovation in a lot of ways, yeah. Right? Just I think for the average person. So how would you position this as, being your technology as being disruptive, to the industry or?
Yeah. So, I think the disruption, right? Right now, conventional distillation is used. That's the big separation technology. We use that all over the place.
Okay.
So that is being used. So there is a level of a little bit of separation that can be done. But the problem is a lot of these mixtures, like I said, we know refrigerants leak. So they were designed, when they do leak, to stay as a mixture. That means the conventional separation technology that we use doesn't work well on them at all, because that's temperature based. It's trying to separate them based off a difference in a boiling point, trying to turn one into a gas, keep one a liquid. And that doesn't work with these mixtures. And so when you think about, okay, if you have a bunch of refrigerant that got mixed together, now there is no technology that can actually split these components back apart. So that's the limitation, is once you hit a mixture that is actually azeotropic, which is what it's called, you're not going to be able to get a full separation of those materials. That's where our technology comes in. And so we're able to fully separate these complex mixtures back into those component parts. And the reason that is so disruptive is because no one's able to do that at all right now. And when you're able to get it back as a pure component, it's almost like that virgin product. And so you're able to reblend it into anything you need. And so for us, that eliminates the need to stockpile, that eliminates the need to incinerate, and it opens the opportunity to create and reblend whatever refrigerant that you need.
As you have to go raise capital to do plants, or to do, the amount of capital that you referenced earlier that is going to be required to scale this.
Yeah.
I'm curious, sitting here talking to you, it strikes me that you probably have to have these conversations with investors similar to this conversation, where it's I don't know the first thing about ionic liquids or about refrigerant or about separation or about how this is different than what happens today. Are you finding investors to generally be receptive to, you're the expert and you understand what this is, and you understand there's enough credibility in the work that you've done and the work that you're doing with Mark and so on? Or are you finding that you have to convince them and explain this down, and I guess the only way is dumb this down for the average investor, I guess is the way to say that?
I think everyone's very open. So one, I think our team and our work speaks for itself. And so we're able to back up what we're doing with data, with the science, talk through all of that. And I think also people are really excited to learn more about refrigerants and about this industry. It's not one that's talked about a lot within the climate tech space. As you mentioned, it doesn't seem to be something very innovative, right? It's an old industry in a lot of ways, and people don't think about it as somewhere that new technology is going to be coming into or out of. And so for us, we're finding there's a lot of interest in learning about it, and also learning about how we can apply this technology in the refrigerant market, but also to other complex separations.
So if the technology works the way you guys are intending it to, how's this look 10 years from now? And paint that picture for us.
Yeah, I mean, 10 years from now, there ideally is an industrial scale plant that is able to separate these complex mixtures back into those pure component parts. We're probably plugged into that reclaimer market. So the reclaimers are the companies that do aggregation and separation and reclaim today. And ideally, we just want to plug into their network and say, send us the material that you're unable to separate, and let us process that material for you and send it back out. And so for us, we really see being able to process every pound of refrigerant that's coming out of this market and make sure that it is reused, recycled, repurposed in the most effective way.
And the most effective way to do that is that plants in multiple locations to reduce kind of maybe the logistical challenge of doing that, or is there an economy of scale of having a large plant and dealing with the transportation, dealing with the logistics of moving the refrigerant? Like, how do I think about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely an economy of scale with this, but there's also, like you said, there's a lot of logistics. Thankfully, we move refrigerants around the world constantly, so there's a lot of ways to do that. For us, we're still figuring out and talking to key partners about what is the most ideal setup. Is it one big site? Is it a couple spread out? And I think we're still working on figuring that problem out.
When I think about disruptive technologies, I often think about who's being disrupted. So who are there, or who are the incumbents that are maybe standing in the way of this progress, or maybe not wanting to see this happen, if that makes, like, who's being disrupted in this space? Or is it just a natural evolution of a current technology or of a current, there's really not anybody who's being disrupted. This is a disruptive technology in terms of just what it's doing.
I would say it's disruptive in what it's doing because we really do want to utilize and be partners with everybody who's already within that industry. And so for us, plugging in to the existing network is huge. And we really want to be able to supply that technology and that capability to the existing reclaimers. And then the products open the door to where there's a lot of different people who can use those products. So it doesn't limit it just to reclaim. It could also be used in virgin materials. So you could see a new refrigerant that's being produced that kind of uses some of the old refrigerant. Well, now that reclaimed source could go into some of those new refrigerant blends. So it really opens the door to say, let us be able to handle all this material that we've had challenges with, and open the door for how we can use it in the future.
And do you see that ecosystem of uses, or maybe those producers being maybe aggregated around the location, or is this turned into another logistical challenge to get it where it needs to go after the fact? I mean, I guess I'm thinking about this more from a regional economic development perspective now, I guess, does this ecosystem have a geography to it, or, around wherever you establish this plant?
I mean, reclaimers are all over the U.S.
Okay.
And so there's sites all over. You can find refrigerant sites in every state for some level of the market. Sure. And so for us, I think it will really just depend on what makes the most sense through talking to key partners of, is it really that one or two key sites where those need to be? But I think really we're able to move this refrigerant around and get it to sites. And so I don't think that's going to be a huge issue.
So as somebody that comes from a technology background with a PhD, the MBA, the deep tech understanding of what this is, what's leadership look like for you? Like, how hard has that transition be? And how is this, again, going back to that academia background, what's the leadership of the company felt like for you as you've become, the CEO and been able to lead the company so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of those things where you're growing and learning. And luckily, I have a phenomenal team who's growing and learning with me, and we're all kind of pushing this forward. And so, I mean, that's something that I don't think you're fully ever prepared for. And so, I definitely think it's something that I am constantly trying to grow with and learn with. and be better at, and adjust and pivot and be able to transition as needed.
What do you do in your experience? So before you did your PhD, what was your focus? Because I think there was another technology or another focus that you had before you were in the refrigerant space. Am I wrong?
Yeah. So I worked in photolithography and electroplating. Yeah.
Okay, now you're going to have to explain all of that now.
A lot of the processes we use for chip manufacturing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got you. So in your experience, whether it's the previous, technology work that you were doing or this, what happens when the technology doesn't work? Or the science doesn't work the way you expect it to? When the pitch falls flat, those types of things. How do you react to those, or how do you overcome those challenges?
Yeah, thankfully we haven't had too many of those.
Sounds like it. Yeah.
But I think really it's being able to pivot. It's being able to understand if something can be engineered around, if it's something that we need to find a different solution to, and figuring out and really going back to that problem solving of, okay, what type of problem is this, and how do we adjust and how do we move past it? So I think for us, there's been a lot of pivots, and there's a lot of things that we're constantly saying, oh, we'll try this. Okay, go through this testing. Okay, now we'll try this. It's just that constant iteration, and then understanding that there are a lot of problems that can be solved. And if not, then okay, what's the next best thing you can go to? Or maybe it's even better than what you had before.
Yeah, scientific method, right? You guys are constantly iterating on that. And what was the break point for that? Where did you, in the work that maybe Mark was doing prior that you were doing, at what point in that process do you say, okay, there's a there? We've got something that is actually ready to become a company, ready to move forward?
I think we knew the technology had a ton of potential, and we strongly believe this technology could separate these mixtures. And so for us, it became that market proof point. That was really the step forward then to say, okay, we believe this technology can solve this problem. We know that the market is interested in a solution like this. Let's start the company. And then the company was founded in 2022, and so we didn't really start true business operation towards the middle end of 23, once I was able to transition full-time after the PhD. So we had a lot of time in there as well where we were still developing the technology. We'd started building a pilot scale column, and so we were really gearing up to do that initial kind of proof of concept work that was supported through National Science Foundation, through our phase 1 grant, and show the beginnings of, yes, this technology actually fundamentally works. And then also here's the market side. We went through Icicore round 2, so we did it all over again.
So you had to go through 2 rounds of Icores. What's the difference between the 2?
So the first one was really an academic team. So I was a PhD student, Mark was a professor, and then we had our industrial mentor. And then the second time around, we did it as a company, and we did it as an all SBIR group. And so we got to go even deeper. And it's something that was a really valuable lesson for me was the first time we learned a lot. You learn all these things you didn't know. The second time, you learn even more. And so it was that thing where you can always talk to your customers again and always talk to more and always have those interviews. So it really shows that customer discovery is essential, and it really can never stop. You have to always be doing that actively.
So is one of the things that you get out of Icore, especially the phase 2 piece, is, now you've got your punch list of folks that you're selling to? Or how do I think about that? When I think of customer discovery,
yeah.
I think of, all right, now not only do I know where the market need is, or I know how maybe to describe this differently, or, where the sweet spot of, value creation is. Mm-hmm. Are these now the folks that you're positioning the technology to from a sales perspective? How does sales in this space work, I guess?
Yeah.
How does growth work?
I think yes, in a lot of ways, and no in some, just in the sense that we talk to everyone in the market. And so some of the people we talk to are people who are more involved on the legislative side,
okay,
or involved on the equipment manufacturing side, or the production side, or even academic research side of some of this, and then looking at, okay, the reclaimers, the actual boots on the ground. So I think we talked to everyone.
So it's value chain discovery versus maybe just endpoint customer discovery.
For us, we wanted to get the full picture, and we needed to understand the whole market and then also narrowed then in on our, like, who we thought our customer was. And so we did kind of that perspective of, okay, let's start broad, and then we'll narrow in, and that way we have the full understanding of, okay, legislative parties, like, how is this coming in? Do we fully understand this? What are people seeing? What are the trends? What are these going to look like in the next 5 years? Okay, now let's go talk to OEMs and understand some of their pain points, producers, reclaimers, the kind of just everybody within this market who could be impacted by reclaim.
And is that, so you said 9 weeks? Is it kind of that?
Yeah, it's right in that ballpark, yeah.
And is this, you have to do those interviews within that period? You have to do all that, we'll call it the gathering of the data in that period, and then you have a period of time to actually, synthesize that and create some output, or is it all have to be done in that?
It's kind of all done in one. So it's a really heavy lift. And so you're doing the interviews, you're creating slides, you're presenting on what you found out, you're adjusting your hypotheses, you're figuring out what other questions you need to ask. And I mean, it's really learning how to learn from these people who are experts in what they do. And you're not really talking about your technology or your solution. You're learning to listen and figure out, okay, does this fit based off of what I'm hearing? And so that was a big learning as well for me was, okay, you're not going in and trying to sell anybody on your technology.
You're not pitching, you're asking questions.
You're learning. You're there to learn. You're there to ask questions, and you want to ask intentional questions, but you want to find out what are the pain points. Like, are they even related to what I do, or are we on a different base?
Yeah.
And so that was something that was really neat to learn, is how do you go into these conversations and learn from these people who do this every single day and find out what their concerns are and what their pain points are, and see then kind of stepping away, okay, does our technology actually serve that? And do we need to change it? Do we need to adjust? Do we need to pivot based off of that?
So when I think about investable technologies, you've got the SaaS side of the world that is pretty, especially with a lot of low code, no code type things that are out there. Investable, the ramp up time is relatively quick. You can get to, customer acquisition relatively quickly. As you get down the deeper the tech, the more disruptive the technology, the longer the lead time to maybe get that market traction and make that a reality. For you, what's the realistic kind of ramp time look like to having a plant and having some of the things that we've talked about in terms of what the future looks like for Icorium?
Yeah, for us, we are set on trying to have a commercial demonstration plant up in the next 2 years, and then moving straight on after that into an industrial scale plant. And so, we're scaling this technology as quickly as we can, going through kind of those proof points, and finding the right strategic partners to help push it along. But I think it is different than a SaaS timeline for sure. It just takes a little bit more time. It takes time to actually build a plant site. It takes time to commission it. It takes time to get it up and running. So I think that is a big difference. And it's something that, it takes a little bit of patience, I think, when you're looking at it, and it's a little bit of a different timeline, especially when you think of the investment track or you think of people buying in. It's just a little bit longer than what you'd see with SaaS.
So now I'm thinking about the first time that we talked again, and you were explaining this idea of a test facility or a test plant. I think, what would you just refer to it as? I don't know, as a commercial demonstration plant. Yeah. What's that look like versus a regular plant? How is this just, kind of one machine that does the work, or one, closed system that does the work? What's that look like from a scale perspective versus what a plant looks like?
So it's probably still a couple towers, so it's not just going to be one, but the real big difference is the amount of material it can process. And so for us, this commercial demonstration plant will probably be in that low 1 million pounds a year plus range, where for an industrial scale plant, and something that can really be able to service the entire U.S. market for us, is more in that 10 to 20 million pounds a year range. And so we get a huge scale up in terms of the amount of refrigerant that we're going to be handling. And really, for us, it's determining and making sure we have this ability to process anything that comes in the door. And so if you get a 10 plus component mixture, how do you do that? How do you do that efficiently? How do you make sure you have all the right processes in place to handle it?
So you have to be able to handle the, I don't know, I'm saying this wrong, the worst case scenario or the most complex scenario or the simplest scenario. So you have to build for the biggest one, right? You have to build for the most complex one.
You build for the most complex and have the ability to do it. Okay. And then I think for us, a lot of what we're learning is, okay, what are the ones we're going to see in the most quantities? What are the most common mixtures that we're going to see out there? And making sure that we have kind of the right amount of towers to process that, making sure that we have everything scaled properly so that it can efficiently handle it. So for us, it comes back to a lot of our modeling capabilities and being able to predict, okay, if we have this come in the door, what does this look like? How would we run this through and get to those answers?
So you talked about this being a global issue, global challenge. Is this a global company that then has locations around the world? Is this a licensing opportunity for Icorium? How do you think about the company as the CEO in the future as it relates to that global scale and tackling this global challenge in front of you?
I mean, the wonderful thing about this technology, right, is it doesn't change based off of where we go in terms of countries. And so if it is designed to handle all of the refrigerant mixtures that we have here, it's going to be the same components that we see over in Europe and Canada and Mexico. We're going to see a lot of those same ones. And so we're able to just pick up this technology and essentially build another plant that's able to match then the capacity and the needs of that market. And so for me, I really do see the potential for this to have industrial scale plants that are servicing multiple countries all across the world.
Okay. All right. So a couple fun questions.
Okay.
If you could invent any device, not just for climate, but to make life better in some way, what would it be?
100% would be a time traveling or
I'm all in. All right, keep going. Time travel. All right.
Time travel. Yeah, 100%.
Oh, but now I feel like I need to ask you, like, if you could go back in history and have dinner with anyone, who would it be?
That's not even a fair question.
I mean, I think that's kind of a common question we all talk about all the time, right? No? All right, especially if you're going to invent a time machine.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I think for me, the time machine is even more about the future.
All right, so you want to go the other way.
I want to go the other way.
You don't want to go backwards, you want to go forward.
I want to go the other way.
All right.
Yeah. And because I think there's a lot of things that in terms of like engineering and in terms of design and the way we think about systems today, we often leave out the impact side. And we don't always think about, okay, what is the long-term impact of something like this being out there? And so for me, I think refrigerants are a great example of this, they have extremely high global warming potential. It's something we didn't even think about at the time.
Sure.
So how could have we designed these to begin with without having that as something that was a problem? So I think for me, there's a lot of that. How do we think through what are going to be the challenges of certain things we produce or new technologies we're putting out there, and how do we stop them before they even start?
Did you guys catch that? I want to go back in history and have dinner with someone, and she wants to go forward and figure out how to make a better world by seeing what the future looks like. Yeah, it's the difference between a CEO and a guy just interviewing her on stage. I just want to point that out to everybody. What's the craziest thing you've ever done that people told you was a bad idea, but it ended up working out?
Oh man, the craziest thing. I mean, I think, well, one of the things that was kind of crazy was just even coming out here to Kansas in general. I will say about half the people I talked to, because I was on the fence. I was like, go to industry, go do my PhD. I can say it was a pretty much 50-50 split of people I talked to in my life who said, go do it, and you don't need to do that at all.
Wow. Okay.
And so that was something that,
where that led.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's one of those things, right, where you probably, I probably couldn't have gone wrong, per se, to different pathways. But I will say that is like having myself have to say, yep, I'm going to go do this thing. It did feel a little, it doesn't sound it because it was a PhD program, but it did feel a little bit crazy to say, yep, I'm going to move away from everybody, like my family, everybody I know, this great network of people and mentors, and go out and try this thing and explore and see what we can do.
What was the driving factor for your decision then, I guess? Like what was the convincing thing for you to take that path? I'm curious.
I mean, I think for me, I knew I wanted to, if I had that chance to go see if I could work on something like an impactful technology that could impact climate change. If you get that chance and that door is open, for me, that was something that I couldn't pass up. That's something I wanted to go try. And I wanted to work with Mark. I wanted to work with a person who had an incredible vision and passion for something like this. And so for me, it was worth the risk of it potentially not working.
Right.
And potentially not fully understanding what it was or what the potential opportunity was. It was worth the risk to come out and try.
Did you know Mark reputationally? Did you know Mark prior?
I knew him.
Like, you knew Mark?
I knew Mark.
Okay.
A little bit. It's actually, it's kind of funny how we met. My parents and my brother were on a tour of KU for his college tours. Yeah.
Okay,
so for
right.
my brother. And they actually ran into Mark and got to talk to him a little bit. At the time I was a senior, I guess about to be a senior in my undergrad chemical engineering program, starting into my MBA, starting into master's stuff. And so they told him like, oh, our daughter's a chemical engineer. He's like, oh, can I have her email?
I did.
And so pretty much about 3 years before I actually came out to do my PhD, Mark and I got connected and we stayed in touch and were able to eventually get me out here.
So did he recruit you out here? Was that the way that worked then? Okay. All right.
It was something where I think we both, he definitely had an incredible lab, an incredible vision and passion for that. And I wanted to have the chance to, I think, to be a part of that. And so, it worked out very well.
My understanding is the Earth Grant was one of the largest of its kind, I think, that had been established at some point, or fairly significant in terms of the scope of those types of grants that have been given out.
So NSF ERCs do have they're $25 million for the first 5 years, and then an extra $25 million for the next 5 if you get extended.
Okay.
So $50 million over 10 years, and I think that's pretty standard for the NSF budget for it.
Okay.
But I believe it is the largest grant that KU has received.
Yes. Yeah, I believe that is true for sure.
And then with that, you bring in a whole bunch of other resources. So it's not just the NSF funding, ideally, right? You're trying to bring in money from, like I said, local governments. Universities are providing resources, consortium companies, you're sponsoring projects, those types of things. So you're trying to pull in a lot more resources than just that initial $50 million from NSF.
What was the timing of that award to your decision?
So Earth came after. So Earth was awarded less than a year ago.
So you had already made your decision. You were already here. You were already doing your thing.
I was already here,
Okay,
yes.
so that wasn't a factor
No,
really.
so I
Okay.
came in January of 2020.
Okay.
So right before
Perfect timing.
right before
Yeah,
COVID. So exactly.
Welcome to Kansas. Yeah.
Yep. It's like
Here's your apartment.
Move to a new place. Don't know anyone, and I was like, okay, pandemic. Here we go.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, but yeah. So I was here then. 2021 was Icicore. So we kind of made that decision between 2021 and 2022. We founded in 2022, and then really started up Operation 23.
I got to say, I think this is fascinating. I had no idea that this was even a thing. I mean, circular economy is something we definitely talked about. I think your first time that you were ever here, you were on a circular economy panel with Darren Beck. And so having learned more about this, having myself been a little bit closer to KU, I don't know if you know my affiliation there, but it's just been fascinating to watch the journey that you're on and to understand the magnitude of this.
Yeah.
My hope, and I say this to a lot of our guests, because we are a regional entity and we're all very interested in what happens in this region. My hope is that the work stays here and that you have the opportunity to grow kind of what you're doing in this region. So I guess one of the things that I have are there any geographical benefits or requirements for the plant? Like a lot of plants need to be close to maybe certain types of water supply or certain types of, maybe logistical benefits, those types of things. Is there any of those things that you would consider that would prevent it from maybe this being established here and being a company that stays here and grows here?
I mean, I think
No pressure. I'm not trying
No
to
pressure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for us, right, the plant locations are going to need to be strategic in terms of where does it make most sense logistically for the refrigerants, for that material to move. But I also want to highlight being able to be so close to KU and the university and have that connection that we do have is invaluable. And so for us, I definitely see a very long-term like R&D relationship between us and KU, and being able to maintain that and grow that. And I mean, all of our employees are here in Kansas. We're all happy to be here. So I think like I guess I don't know exactly where everything's going to end up, but I do think that we will maintain a strong relationship with KU, with Kansas, and I definitely see that.
Yeah, didn't mean to put you on the spot. Like, we're going to come back and look at the tape in a couple of years and be like, but you promised. Yeah, that won't happen. Kalin, thanks for coming. Thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for helping educate us on, kind of the importance of this part of the circular economy and the impact that refrigerants has on the climate and the opportunity that we have. So I appreciate you being here, being a guest. And thanks for, doing the work where you're doing it. And we hope you stay. So
Wonderful. Thank you for having me.
And we hope we can bring you back in a few years and talk about, where you're at in terms of plant deployment, in terms of, some of the things that you have, milestones that you have in front of you. So are you going to do that? Will you come back?
Of course. Yeah. Fantastic. And huge shout out to the Icorium team.
Fantastic. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Kalin. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Give her a hand, everybody.